She had just laughed, and 30 minutes later, she was already dying. She just didn't know it yet. By morning, she was still in the same position. No struggle, no warning, just silence. And the most disturbing part is, what killed her is something you probably done this week without thinking. So what exactly happened in that quiet room that night? And why is it happening to more people than anyone wants to admit? If you're serious about taking better care of your health, make sure you subscribe. I share simple, practical advice designed especially for seniors. And feel free to leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I always read them and appreciate every one of you. Let's get back to it. She had just laughed. That's the detail her son couldn't stop repeating to the doctors. He said she had just laughed at something on television, something small and forgettable, maybe 30 minutes before she went to bed. She wasn't in pain. She wasn't afraid. She was just tired. She turned off the kitchen light, checked the door, set her phone on the nightstand the way she always did. And that was it. That was the last decision she ever made. By morning, the house was completely still. Not the peaceful kind of still, the kind that makes your stomach drop before your mind even catches up. Her son knocked, then knocked again, and when he pushed the door open, she was exactly where he expected her to be, lying on her side, covers pulled up, perfectly still, the kind of still that doesn't answer. There was no sign of a struggle, no alarm that had gone off, no sound that had traveled through the walls. Whatever happened quietly. The kind of quietly that doesn't give anyone a chance to respond. And when the medical examiner delivered the report, her family expected to hear about some hidden condition, something lurking in her blood work, something the doctors had missed, some rare complication that finally surfaced. That's not what the report said. What it pointed to was something she had done that same evening, something she had done hundreds of times before, something so ordinary, so routine, that nobody in that house would have thought twice about it. My name is Dr. James Cross. I've spent years studying cardiovascular events, specifically the ones that happen at night, in silence, with no warning and no second chance. And when I was first shown the pattern behind cases like hers, I had to sit with it for a long time, because the pattern isn't rare. It doesn't show up in people who are reckless or negligent or ignoring obvious warning signs. It shows up in people who feel fine, people who had a normal dinner, watched something on television, sent a few messages, went to bed. People who had absolutely no reason to believe that night was any different from the 400 nights before it. That's what makes this so dangerous. Not the extremity of the behavior, but the familiarity of it. What I'm about to walk you through in the next several minutes is the exact chain of events that unfolds inside the body on a night like that one. What's happening beneath the surface while you sleep, what builds, what accumulates, what eventually crosses a line the body cannot walk back from, and more importantly, what you can do before tonight changes any of that, because she didn't know. But you are here, right now, watching this, which means you still have something she didn't: time. Don't skip this video. What comes next could be the most important thing you hear this week, possibly this year. Most people believe sleep is the safest thing they do all day, and honestly, that belief makes complete sense. You're lying down, you're still, you're not driving, not working, not under any visible stress. What could possibly go wrong? That question, that assumption of safety, is exactly what I need to address right now. Because what happens inside your body the moment you close your eyes is anything but simple. Here's what nobody tells you. Sleep isn't the absence of activity, it's a shift in activity. The moment you drift off, your body doesn't clock out, it changes jobs. Your heart rate slows down, your blood pressure drops, your breathing becomes shallow and rhythmic. Your brain begins cycling through stages of repair and consolidation. From the outside, you look completely at rest. But on the inside, your cardiovascular system is navigating one of its most delicate balancing acts of the entire day. Blood flow gets redistributed. Certain systems slow dramatically while others quietly accelerate. Your body is essentially performing maintenance work, patching, restoring, recalibrating, all while you remain completely unconscious and completely unaware. It is, in every sense, a controlled vulnerability. Now here's where it gets important. During the day, your body has multiple layers of defense. If your blood pressure spikes, you feel it. If your heart rhythm stutters, you sense something is off. If your oxygen levels dip, your body triggers a response fast enough to correct the problem. You are awake. You are responsive. Your system can escalate an alarm signal and you can act on it. But at night, that feedback loop slows down dramatically. Your brain is deep in recovery. Your nervous system has shifted into a lower gear. The internal warning signals that would wake a fully conscious person sometimes don't break through at all. And that's not a flaw in human design. That's just what deep sleep requires. The problem is, it also means that if something starts going wrong while you're asleep, your body is working with a much narrower margin to catch it, correct it, and recover from it. Think of it this way. During the day, your body is a building with a full security team on duty. At night, the same building is running on a skeleton crew. Most nights, nothing happens. The skeleton crew is enough, but on the nights when something does go wrong, the response is slower. The window to intervene is smaller. The consequences arrive faster than anyone expected. That woman's body went into sleep mode the same way yours will tonight, slowing down, redistributing, becoming quietly, invisibly vulnerable. She had no reason to think that vulnerability would matter, but something was already building inside her body before her head ever touched that pillow. Something that sleep, with all its beautiful, necessary fragility, was completely powerless to stop. And that something? It started hours earlier, with a routine so familiar, so normal, that most people reading this have repeated it just this week. Let me reconstruct her evening for you, not to judge it, not to make her seem careless or reckless or different from anyone watching this right now, but because the details matter, and because when you hear them, really hear them, something is going to shift in how you think about your own evenings. She finished work late. By the time she got home, it was already past 7. She wasn't in the mood to cook anything serious, so she put together something quick, heavier than ideal, but nothing extreme. The kind of meal most people would call fine. She ate at the table, but by the end she had moved to the couch. She didn't drink much with the meal, maybe a few sips of something. She kept telling herself she'd have a full glass of water before bed, the way people tell themselves things they mean but don't always follow through on. She watched television for about an hour, felt the heaviness that comes after eating settle into her body, that familiar, almost comfortable fatigue that makes the couch feel like the right place to stay forever. And then, somewhere around 9:30, she decided she was done for the night. She didn't stretch, didn't take a short walk, didn't give her body any kind of transition. She just went to bed. Now, I need you to stop and ask yourself something honestly. How many nights in the last 2 weeks have looked exactly like that? Because I've described that evening to audiences before, and almost every time, someone goes quiet, not because it sounds dangerous, because it sounds familiar. Late dinner, minimal water, straight to bed. That's not a reckless lifestyle. That's a Tuesday, and that's precisely what makes it so easy to miss. Here's what was happening inside her body during those same hours. The moment she finished that meal, her digestive system activated. Blood flow, a significant volume of it, redirected toward her stomach and intestines to support digestion. That's normal. That's exactly what the body is supposed to do. But here's the part that matters. That redirected blood has to come from somewhere, which means circulation to other areas, including her heart and brain, became slightly less efficient. At the same time, because she hadn't hydrated properly, her blood viscosity had increased. Thicker blood, slower movement, more resistance in the vessels. Again, not catastrophic on its own. The body handles this regularly. But then she lay down, and the moment she went horizontal, her cardiovascular system had to completely reorganize how it was managing pressure and flow, this time without gravity's help. Her heart, which was already working harder than usual to support digestion, now had to recalibrate for a lying position, while simultaneously beginning the slowdown process that sleep requires. Think about what that means. More demand, less efficiency, reduced hydration, and a body preparing to drop its defenses for the night. Nothing about any single piece of that sounds like an emergency, but together, they were quietly building something her body would have to face completely alone, in the dark, in the silence, with no one watching and no way to call for help. The frightening thing about what happened next isn't that it was extreme, it's that her body had probably been managing this exact combination for a long time, adjusting, compensating, absorbing the strain night after night, until one evening, without warning, without ceremony, without any sign that this night was different from all the others, it couldn't anymore. What happens when the body finally runs out of room to compensate? That's exactly where we're going next, and it is not what most people expect. There is a moment, invisible, unannounced, when the body stops absorbing and starts struggling. No alarm sounds, no pain shoots through the chest, no voice in the dark whispers something is wrong. It just shifts, like a bridge that has held the weight of traffic for years, quietly developing fractures deep in its foundation that no inspection ever caught, until the night the conditions are just wrong enough, just heavy enough, for those fractures to finally matter. That's where she was now. Her body had entered sleep mode, heart rate dropping, blood pressure falling, brain beginning its slow descent into deeper stages of rest. Under normal circumstances, that process is protective, but these weren't normal circumstances. Her digestive system was still running at full demand, pulling blood flow and energy toward her abdomen. Her cardiovascular system was simultaneously trying to slow down for sleep, while still meeting the workload digestion required. Two processes, opposite needs, one body trying to serve both at the same time. And here is where the invisible struggle begins. Her heart started working against itself. On one hand, it needed to slow. Sleep was demanding that. On the other hand, the unfinished business of digestion was demanding output. So it did what the heart always does under conflict. It compensated. It found a middle ground. Not quite resting, not quite working. A kind of sustained low-grade effort that the body can maintain for a while. But sustained effort has a cost, and the cost was showing up quietly in her blood pressure, not spiking dramatically, not crashing dangerously, but fluctuating in small, irregular waves that her unconscious body had no way of registering. Meanwhile, her blood, already thicker from inadequate hydration, was moving through her vessels with more resistance than usual. Her heart was pushing harder to move it, her vessels were working harder to accommodate it, and her brain, already deep in recovery mode, already less responsive to internal warning signals, was receiving circulation that was just slightly insufficient. Not enough to trigger a dramatic response, just enough to create instability. This is the part that I find most sobering about cases like hers. The body is extraordinary at hiding its struggle. It will compensate silently for longer than you would believe possible. It will absorb, adjust, redistribute, and push through, without sending you a single signal strong enough to pull you out of sleep. And that silence, that remarkable, almost heroic silence, is exactly what makes this so deadly. Because by the time the body runs out of ways to compensate, the moment has already passed. The window to intervene has already closed. She didn't cry out. She didn't stir. She didn't reach for her phone. She just lay there while her body fought a battle she didn't know was happening, in the only way it knew how. Alone, quietly, with everything it had left. And somewhere in those dark, silent hours, the struggle crossed a line the body cannot come back from. That moment is next. There is no dramatic soundtrack for moments like this, no sudden gasp, no violent tremor moving through the sheets, no cinematic signal that something irreversible is happening inside a human body. Just silence, the same silence that had filled that room for hours, except now it meant something different. Her body had been compensating for a long time, hours of quiet effort, hours of internal negotiation between systems that needed opposite things. But compensation is not the same as correction. Compensation means the body is managing. It does not mean the body is okay. And there is a threshold, different for every person, impossible to predict, impossible to feel from the outside, where managing finally becomes not enough. She crossed that threshold sometime in the early hours of the morning, not with a bang, with a whisper. Here is what likely happened, and I say likely because the body doesn't leave a timestamp, doesn't file a report, doesn't annotate the exact second things went wrong. But the medical pattern is consistent enough that we can trace it. Her blood, thickened by dehydration, moving slower than it should have been, began forming the kind of microscopic resistance in her vessels that the heart has to work against. Her heart, already running that quiet overnight effort to balance digestion and rest, began responding to that resistance with small, irregular pressure changes. Not a dramatic spike, Not the kind of chest-clutching moment people expect from a cardiovascular event. Just an arrhythmia, a subtle disruption in rhythm, the kind that can come and go without anyone ever knowing it happened. Except this time, it didn't come and go. In that disrupted rhythm, blood flow to a critical area became momentarily compromised. Maybe it was the brain. Maybe it was the heart muscle itself. Maybe a clot, small, quiet, almost unremarkable in size, found its way to exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong moment. We can't know which with certainty. What we can know is this: the margin between manageable and catastrophic is far thinner during sleep than most people ever realize. And on this particular night, in this particular body, that margin ran out. What strikes me most, every single time I review a case like this, is how undramatic the actual moment is. People imagine cardiovascular events as loud, as physical, as unmistakable. But the ones that happen during sleep, they are almost unbearably quiet. The body simply reaches a point where the next beat doesn't land the way it should, where the signal misfires, where the oxygen that was supposed to arrive doesn't. And the brain, already deep in sleep, already running on reduced responsiveness, doesn't escalate the alarm in time, doesn't pull the person back to consciousness, doesn't give them the chance to sit up, to reach for something, to call out to anyone in the next room. It just lets go. Not violently, not dramatically, just quietly, in the dark, in the middle of what looked, from the outside, like a perfectly peaceful night's sleep. She never felt it coming. And that, more than anything else I've told you, is what I need you to hold on to right now. Not the fear of it, but the reality of it. Because the body that went through everything I just described wasn't extraordinary. It wasn't uniquely fragile or uniquely damaged. It was just a body that ran out of margin on the wrong night. A body, frankly, that had a lot in common with yours. I need to stop here and say something honestly. If you haven't subscribed yet, you're gambling with information that could keep you alive. I don't say that lightly. The people who don't make it don't get a second chance to hear this. You still do. Use it. Subscribe right now, because what's coming could be the reason you see tomorrow morning. That's the story of one night. But here's what disturbs me even more. This isn't a rare story. It's happening with a frequency that should alarm every single one of us. And the people it's happening to all share something in common. That pattern, that profile, is exactly what we're uncovering next. After a case like hers, the people left behind almost always say the same thing. We had no idea. Not, we ignored the signs. Not, we knew something was wrong. Just, we had no idea. And every time I hear those words, the same thought follows me home. Neither did she. Here is what I need you to understand. What happened to her is not a story about one woman with an unusual combination of bad luck and bad timing. It is a pattern, a repeating, documented, deeply consistent pattern that shows up across ages, across backgrounds, across people who, by every reasonable measure, considered themselves fine. And the frequency of it, the quiet, unreported frequency, is something the medical community has been tracking with growing concern. Let me tell you what these cases have in common. Not the dramatic ones, not the people who had obvious warning signs they dismissed or symptoms they ignored for months. The quiet ones, the ones that shock everyone. They almost always involve someone who had been managing a condition, blood pressure, circulation, cholesterol, well enough that it felt controlled, well enough that the word dangerous never entered the conversation. They almost always involve someone who described themselves just days before as feeling mostly fine. Not perfect, not young, not without their occasional aches and the general weight of getting older, but fine enough to not be worried, fine enough to not change anything. And here's the part that never gets easier to explain. The aging body does not fail loudly. It doesn't send increasingly urgent memos. It doesn't schedule a formal warning before things get serious. What it does, quietly, gradually, over years, is reduce its tolerance for the same stresses it used to absorb without complaint. The late dinner that caused no problem at 45 carries a different weight at 62. The mild dehydration the body corrected effortlessly a decade ago takes longer to recover from now. The cardiovascular system that used to snap back from a disrupted night now holds on to that disruption a little longer each time. None of these changes announce themselves. None of them come with a moment you can point to and say, that's when things shifted. They accumulate invisibly, until one night, the body that absorbed everything for years simply has nothing left to absorb with. That's what makes this population so vulnerable. Not ignorance, not neglect, just the quiet, ordinary confidence of someone who has felt fine for so long that they stopped imagining a night when they wouldn't. She was that person. Statistically, and I say this with complete seriousness, there is a meaningful chance that someone watching this right now is that person too. Not because you are sick, not because you are careless, but because feeling fine has never been the same thing as being safe. And the window where this becomes most dangerous, the specific hours of the night when the body is most exposed and least defended, that's where we're going next. What I'm about to show you will completely change how you think about the hours between midnight and morning. There is a specific window of time every single night. Most people sleep straight through it without ever knowing it exists. It doesn't have a name most people would recognize. It doesn't show up on any alarm clock or any reminder on your phone. But inside the medical community, the data around this window is something that quietly unsettles even experienced physicians, because this is when the body is most exposed, most vulnerable, most unable to defend itself against exactly the kind of internal crisis we've been tracing through this entire story. It happens in the early hours of the morning, somewhere between 2 and 5 a.m., depending on when you fell asleep and how deeply your body has descended into its lowest recovery state. During this window, several things converge simultaneously. Your blood pressure reaches its lowest point of the entire 24-hour cycle. Your heart rate is at its slowest. Your brain is in its deepest stage of sleep, furthest from consciousness, furthest from the ability to register and respond to internal warning signals. Your circulation, already slower than it is during waking hours, has now been running at reduced capacity for several hours straight, and your body's ability to self-correct, to catch an arrhythmia, to respond to a pressure drop, to reroute blood flow away from a developing problem, is operating at its absolute minimum. Think about what that means in practical terms. Everything we tracked through her evening, the heavy meal, the dehydration, the cardiovascular strain, the silent buildup of pressure and resistance and internal conflict, all of that was already in motion when she fell asleep. And it continued building, silently, steadily, as she moved deeper and deeper into the night, right toward this window, the window where her body had the least resources to meet it. This is not a coincidence. Cardiovascular events that occur during sleep disproportionately cluster in this exact time frame, not randomly distributed across the night, not equally likely at 10 p.m. as they are at 4 a.m. They concentrate here, in the dark overlap between peak vulnerability and minimum defense, the body at its most exhausted, the threat at its most advanced, and the margin between survival and silence at its most terrifyingly thin. She had no way of knowing what time it was when her body finally crossed that line. No way of knowing she had entered the window. No way of knowing that the combination of everything she had done that evening was meeting the worst possible hour to meet it. She was just asleep. The way she had been asleep hundreds of nights before, trusting, the way we all trust, that sleep was protecting her, not realizing that on this particular night, the window had opened, and nothing inside her body had enough left to close it. But here is where everything changes, because unlike her, you are awake right now. You are informed. And what comes next isn't about fear. It's about the specific, actionable truth that turns everything we've covered into something you can actually use, starting tonight. We've come a long way from that quiet bedroom, from the soft click of a kitchen light switching off, from a woman who had just laughed at something on television and had absolutely no reason to believe the night ahead was anything other than ordinary. We've traveled through her body, through her bloodstream, through the silent hours where everything built and accumulated and finally, irreversibly, gave way. And now I want to give you something she never had. Let's connect everything, because when you see it all together, not as separate pieces but as a single chain, something important becomes clear. It wasn't the late meal alone. It wasn't the dehydration alone. It wasn't the age, or the circulation changes, or the cardiovascular strain alone. It was all of them, arriving together, compounding each other, creating conditions the body could not safely navigate during its most vulnerable hours. That is what a chain reaction looks like from the inside. Not one catastrophic mistake, just several small ones, each harmless in isolation, converging at the worst possible moment in the worst possible window. And here's the part that changes everything. Chains can be broken, not with dramatic intervention, not with complete lifestyle overhauls that nobody actually sustains, with small, deliberate adjustments made consistently, before the chain ever has a chance to fully form. Give your body time to finish digestion before lying down. Even 60 to 90 minutes makes a measurable difference in how hard your cardiovascular system has to work overnight. Hydrate properly in the evening, not excessively, just enough to keep your blood moving with the viscosity it needs to flow freely through the night. Create a genuine transition into sleep. A few minutes of stillness, of lowered stimulation, of giving your nervous system permission to shift gears before it's forced to. These are not complicated instructions. They are not expensive. They are not time-consuming. But they are the difference between a body that enters sleep with adequate resources and a body that enters sleep already running on empty. She didn't know any of this, and I have thought about that more times than I can count, because none of what happened to her was inevitable. It was a chain of ordinary moments that nobody recognized as dangerous, because nobody had ever shown her how to look at them that way. You have been shown, right here, right now, in the time it takes most people to scroll past something that might have saved them. So tonight, before the lights go off, before the house goes quiet, before you trust the next several hours to a body that will face them completely alone, pause. Think about what you're handing it to work with, because sleep should be the part of your day where your body recovers everything it spent, not the part where it spends the last of what it had. This is Dr. James Cross, and tonight, your choices matter. Thanks for watching all the way through. Staying informed is key to living a healthier, longer life. If you want more simple, practical health advice, make sure you subscribe and tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a comment and rate this from 1 to 10. Your feedback helps me create better guidance for you.